Okay. So this is the Board of Adjustments regular meeting for Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022. And I'm going to read the preamble. Welcome to the City of Tempe Board of Adjustments meeting. The City of Tempe Board of Adjustments is authorized by the Arizona Revised Statute and the City of Tempe zoning ordinance. Its function is to grant relief where a literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance would result in an unnecessary property hardship, to interpret provisions of the zoning ordinance or variances, and to hear appeals from any person or city official aggrieved the decision of a person responsible for the enforcement of the zoning ordinance or zoning ordinance administrator and hearing officer abatements. The board has the City of Tempe Community Development Staff Summary Report on the item being considered at this meeting and will use this report in their deliberations. All applicants and interested citizens, when a request is called or when you wish to address the board, please make sure you fill out the citizens request forms. Then step to the microphone and state your name and city of residence. Please submit the form to a staff member before you begin speaking at the microphone. Right now, I'd like to do staff introductions. First, we have Jeff Tamlovich, Director, Community Development. Steve Abramson, Principal Planner. Diane Kaminsky, Senior Planner. And Joanna Berry, Administrative Assistant. And now we'll do a roll call to announce the board members that are present.
Ricky Gans,
Jack Confer is present.
Richard Watson,
Brett Siegel.
And Ron Kege is present.
I'm Jim Frazee, Acting Chairperson. So the first item on the agenda was to be the consideration of the meeting minutes for the study session and formal meeting for July 28th, 2021. But since we do not have enough board members present that actually attended that meeting, either live or by WebEx, we're going to vote to move those minutes until the next meeting, which should be the end of July 2022. Correct.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to make a motion to that effect?
I would, thank you.
I'd like to move that the minutes from our last meeting, which was July 23rd, 2021, be postponed until the next scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting.
I'll second.
Any discussions, questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. So the next item on the agenda, item number 2, is a request for a variance for a building height increase from 15 feet for the allowed 35 feet to 50 feet for the City of Scottsdale Thomas A. Hantz Police and Fire Training Facility, which is located at 911 North Statham Drive. The applicant is Steve Frasillo with Frasillo Architects. And we have that as, I believe, planning case 220066.
Good evening. My name is Steve Fusello, Fusello Architects. Also joining me is Assistant Fire Chief Ryan Freeberg with City of Scottsdale, as well as Nate Kroll, who's
I
the
don't think your microphone's on.
Is my microphone?
Yeah, it should be.
Is it okay? Is that okay? Is it working now?
Okay, slow close. Thank you.
So I'll start over.
Okay.
So I'm joined, my name is Steve Fusello, Fusello Architects. representing City of Scottsdale. I have with me Assistant Fire Chief Ryan Freeberg with Scottsdale Fire, as well as Nate Kroll, who is the Capital Project Management Project Manager for the city on this job. Thank you for giving us consideration today. Next slide, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Unless I can do that. Am I able to do it? I want to give you just a brief presentation and overview to put in context our request. We are requesting a variance for additional building height, as has been mentioned. I have a few site plans to help put our project in context, to help you understand where this project is on the site. We have some building elevations, some cross sections, and a couple of renderings to help clarify our proposal to you today. Next slide, please. I want to clarify the request for the building height. As you know, our maximum allowable building height is 35 feet, and we're asking to go up to 50 feet. There's two reasons for that. One, we have, as part of the project, a new fire training academy building. It's a two-story structure. We chose to join it with this process. We are potentially, because of the additional height that we need, 2.5 feet, there would have been another process to be able to do that. It's within 10% of the existing maximum allowable height. That is one of our requests. But the primary request is to gain additional height for two new fire training prop structures. These prop structures are a very unique building type. They don't really fall within the building code as an occupancy classification. And when you start looking at the strict application of the zoning code, it's hard to categorize some of the appurtenances and elements within it. Much of the request for the additional 15 feet is for railings and rappelling bars that project up above the training prop. So although the request is for 15 feet, we're not actually requesting 15 feet of additional occupiable space. It's actually elements that don't really fall into a specific category within the zoning code. So there are certain items within the zoning code that allow for certain building types like spires and cupolas and antennas, and we couldn't really fit it within that. So it's in kind of a category of its own, and I hope through some of the exhibits that I want to share with you today that you'll see a little bit of clarity as to what it is that we're striving for. Next slide, please. The site location is north of the 202 freeway. It's east of Indian Bend Wash and west of McClintock Drive. It's in a general industrial district. We have a couple neighboring properties to the north. We have the SRP substation to the east, power lines that run the east property line, at least, I would say, approximately 50 feet tall, and it actually cuts through the southern portion of our site, literally across our project site. Next slide, please. This is the north is oriented to the right. I wanted to give you a little bit of larger view of what the site consists of today. For about 30 years, I think we're coming up to about 30 years of existence out on this site. There's been the blue building is an existing police training facility. The red structures are a combination of existing classroom buildings as well as two fire training props that exist today. The other lightly toned red structures are awnings and burn props. To the left on the item number 1 is an existing vehicle training track that is going to be replaced as part of this project as well. Next slide, please. This is a superimposition of what a bigger part of this project involves. So part of our effort is involved expanding the existing police training facility, which is creating a new parking lot in the middle of the site. To the left is a new vehicle training pad for fire apparatus to be able to maneuver cone courses in their driving instruction. The structures that are in question today are labeled 4, 5, and 2. Number 2 is the new 2-story training academy, which is being placed in place of the existing structures. It consists, just so you know, of classrooms, an auditorium, and an apparatus bay, locker rooms, restrooms. Structure number 5 is a training prop. That's the tallest of the 3 training props. Item number 3 is a flashover chamber. It's no more than 15 feet tall. And item number 4 is a training prop that is about 39 feet tall. And we call that number 4 FTS number 6. FTS is the manufacturer of these training prop, and FTS number 7 is going in place of the label number 5. These just to also put in context the purpose of this facility and why this is so important for the city of Scottsdale is that they're trying to provide a training scenario that mirrors what is going on in our surrounding context. So they have a 4-story structure right now, and they're trying to replace it with a 5-story, but we're changing the floor-to-floor height to keep it as close to what's existing as possible. Next slide, please. This is just a graphic I have in here just for reference without the aerial, so same information as the slide before. Next slide, please. This is an important piece of information to share with you. The overall boundary of the site is defined as the city of Scottsdale owned property, but it consists of 4 parcels. It's important to note this because with the next slide, please. The datum that we have to refer to building height is taken from the top of curb elevation of the middle of the parcel that the building and structures are sitting on. So the yellow star is the elevation datum that we're referring to when we say 35 feet and above. We have ownership of the northern parcel, and the green arrow or star is actually 3 feet higher. If we were to be able to take our datum from that elevation, we wouldn't be requesting a 2.5-foot variance for the training academy building. We still would be for FTS 6 and 7. But the distance from that elevation datum all the way across the site is almost 900 feet or 500 feet to the training structures, and the overall length of our site is about 1,000 feet in length and more. Next slide, please. I wanted to share this view to give you an idea of what we are proposing to the DR board regarding this training academy structure. So to the top is the view looking towards the 2-story training building. And to give you an idea of what a training prop looks like is depicted in the bottom of that rendering. They are pre-engineered shipping containers that are modified to provide rooms and chambers to simulate a real-world scenario. Next slide, please. The bottom elevation is the west elevation of the training academy, and I drew a red line in there to indicate where the elevation of the 35-foot high ordinance stands, and going 2.5 feet up above that is just so that we can screen the mechanical equipment. So we're dealing with very conventional floor-to-floor heights, and we're asking for that additional 2.5 feet so that we can integrate into the architecture the screening of the units. We feel that that's in the spirit of what the zoning code always asks for, is to find a way to integrate architecturally the mechanical unit screening. Instead of designing a building and putting a wall around the units, we actually integrate it into the form of the building. In doing so puts us a little bit higher than that, but again, if our reference point was taken from the northern portion of our site, we wouldn't be seeking this variance, this portion of the variance. Next slide, please. This is a cross-section indicating the portion of the building that projects above that. Next slide, please. This is a depiction. On the left is the existing fire training prop that stands today on site. To the right is the tallest, the FTS 7 that sits in the middle of the site. The proposed fire training prop, if you compare the two, if you take away the reference point at the top of curb elevation that is several hundred feet away, and you look at what is projecting above pavement, the existing structure, which was prior approved through the Board of Adjustment approval in 2006, projects up about 44 feet to the top of the parapet. If you compare it to the 4-story existing structure to the 5-story proposed structure, we are literally about the same height of building mass as we are to what is solid of the existing structure. What is projecting above that is a guardrail, an open guardrail, and one rappelling bar that we cannot screen or conceal from view. We feel that this was a pretty comparable graphic to be able to show what is existing. We feel that the railings and guardrails of the proposed prop is very consistent and very open and transparent as to what is next door to our property, which is laden with power lines and a substation structure that is quite tall in comparison to the structures on this site. Next slide, please. This is a series of elevations of this prop, and I show this just to give you a general sense. On the upper left drawing is the south elevation, and to let you know that even though we're asking for this additional height, it's not the entire structure or footprint that we're seeking. It's just a portion of this structure is what's projecting up. The whole purpose of this is to help train first responders to be prepared to what they're going to see in the real world, and that is a lot of urban development and multi-story construction in our community, and I think you could say even around City of Tempe. Next slide, please. The reason why we're seeking it for FTS Custom 6 is because there's one rappelling bar that technically projects above that datum elevation of 35 feet. Maybe a little bit of a guardrail. And the reason why we chose 15 feet is not because we measured it exactly to what is sticking up. We're trying to give ourselves a little bit of buffer because we are designing a grading plan. Everything is in reference to a curb elevation that's 400 feet away from the structure. We have a civil engineer who's developing the grading and drainage and pavement plans across 1,000 feet of site. So we're asking for that extra. We put in 15 feet, not because that's how tall a structure is, but that's to give us some breathing room and tolerance that as we finally engineer it, if the whole structure moves up and down, we're not going to put ourselves out of a height requirement that was set on potentially hearing today. So we gave ourselves a little bit of buffer and tolerance for those kinds of things. Again, most of what we're looking for with this is our railings and a rappelling bar that's inherent and unique to the nature of this building type. It's not something you can categorize within a zoning code and identify and point to that it fits the bill. It's in its own category by itself. Next slide, please. And last, this is a depiction on the left side is a Google Earth view of the way the site is viewed today to the existing training prop that has the red arrow to it. The depiction to the right is a rendering of the proposed structure. We feel that is very comparable to what has been approved prior for the historical use on this site, comparable in scale. And if you look at the power lines in the left image of what you're looking through towards the site, a guardrail and a rappelling bar seems to be consistent with the types of things that one sees at that elevation. Next slide, please. This want to identify neighboring development that is of heights that are higher than what is being proposed for this site. So Banyan North development, we understand from looking at prior approved cases, is up to 64 feet. Carvana, further west, is up to 93 feet. We have the SRP power poles that is in the general industrial district. It has power poles that are at least as tall as the proposed structure and literally passes through our site at the southern portion. Next slide, please. I just have a few remaining images and I'll be able to turn over for questions. I apologize. This is a view of the Training Academy building as viewed from the front door. You can see the roof form comes up and disappears. So the intent of trying to screen the mechanical units is all integral to the architecture. Next slide, please. This is a west view of the building, very minimal perspective view of what's projecting above. But our intent is to design a building that's in the true spirit of what the zoning ordinance seeks, is to integrate such screening elements integral to the architecture. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit of a view. You can see the railings of the tallest of the fire training props and the mechanical screen off in the distance. Next slide. And that, I believe, is the last view to give you a vignette of what the smaller structure is with its railings and potential rappelling bar that would project ever so slightly above that 35-foot height. Next slide, please. And lastly, in just quick summary, our intent is to stay consistent with the historical use of the site that's existed for 30 years, trying to keep pace with surrounding development. Fire department is being challenged with upgrading their facility to meet the demands of what's being built out in the surrounding context. This is a site that's not just used by Scottsdale, but regional partners, including City of Tempe. City of Tempe Fire Station down the street on Curry Road comes and uses this site for training purposes in lieu of going to the Tempe training facility, so they can stay within their service area. We feel like the unique circumstance of the site, the proposed use, and the strict interpretation of the zoning code makes it challenging for a unique project like this. We feel like it's in its own category. We're even working with the building official on how to permit and do the structural plan review for something like this, because it doesn't fit within the mold of the building code. We've given a lot of effort to be very complementary in scale. We've been very thoughtful throughout our design process to be respectful of the context, to be respectful of neighbors and what's around us. We've had a public neighborhood meeting on May 11th. We didn't have anyone attend, and to my knowledge, we haven't had any known comments that at least have been passed along to me. And hopefully you would see that we're doing our best to creatively design a structure that's in the spirit of the zoning code, trying to be very respectful, try to put out a great product that you all could be proud of as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions or welcome any of my colleagues with me if they had any additional comments.
Very good. Thank you very much for your comments. Do we open it up for questions from the board at this time, or do we hear the staff?
Questions from the board to the applicant.
The applicant, okay.
If you have any questions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
let me start since he's online. Ron, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, any of the board members? Question I have, so just for clarification, when you're pointing out the fire training facility is going to be 2 feet over, so the application or the request for the 35 to 50, that 15 feet, that's all inclusive of all the buildings on the facility.
It is, and Diana, please correct me if I'm incorrect in this, but we chose to include that portion in this because we knew that we were going to be asking for a little bit of height, and that 2.5 feet would either go through a use permit standard process, which would be a different formal process of submittals, which within the use permit, within the zoning code, it stipulates we're allowed to be 10% above our building height, which would be an additional 3.5 feet. So we would have gone through a separate process to be able to get that additional 2.5 feet, which we conform to. We're within that allotment. But instead of going through a whole nother process, we decided to bundle it within here just due to the logistics of process.
Okay, thank you.
But we're not intended to use that 15 feet for the building
Right,
at all.
for that building, okay. All right, thank you. Staff presentation?
Good evening, Chair and Board. I'm Diana Kaminsky, Senior Planner with the City of Tempe. The request, as you've heard, is for a variance for building height increase of 15 feet from 35 feet to 50 feet, located at 911 North Statham Drive in Tempe, Arizona. Next slide. The variance, as we were just discussing, is incorporating all of the different structures on site. They did provide a chart that showed the datum point for each of those buildings in reference to the finished floor. That's what the FFE means in the middle of the column on the bottom of the screen, along with what the height would be from the datum point at the street front, which is different than finished floor height, and then the deviation by the request for each individual building. So you can see what how that affects each particular structure on site. Next slide. So this is a reference similar to the one that you saw a minute ago, not as graphically advanced, but showing the prop FTS at 39 feet, the flashover building at about 13 feet, the prop FTS at 48 feet, the police building at 24, and the fire building at 37.4 with the datum point. Next slide. And this is also showing the relationship of the mechanical equipment. In our code, we allow mechanical equipment to be screened separately from the building structure and not have to follow the standards of the height. But when you integrate it into the architecture, which is a more graceful solution to the architecture, it does push you into the whole building height being taller. So that's why they were requesting that height for this structure. Next slide. And these are non-occupied spaces used for training. So this is to show the different apparatus and how they interact with each other and where the heights fall within relationship to the 35-foot general industrial district height. Next slide. Next slide. You've seen these before. So next slide. The most important thing for you to consider is the criteria, and you had a question about that earlier. So I'm going to go through all of the criteria for a variance. The special circumstances applicable to this property, obviously the shape. It's a very narrow frontage on Curry. It actually fronts two different streets. The topography has a significant slope downward toward the Salt River Basin. The location has a freeway adjacency, a power substation, and a wash. It's the trifecta of uniqueness in terms of what's going on the property. The surroundings, the newer buildings that are being developed, both in Tempe and Scottsdale, are at taller heights. The ladder truck, rescue, and firefighting training equipment is limited by the current prop buildings, which are 38 feet tall. From a prior approved use permit standard, they were able to get that 38 feet. The new buildings in Tempe and Scottsdale are being built between 40 and 60 feet, requiring services provided both by municipalities in the event of an emergency. So the proposed prop buildings are necessitated by the new developments to assure training meets the new building typologies. The strict application of the code in terms of how this would deprive the property of privileges enjoyed by others, it's hard to quantify the enjoyment of this property in relationship to any other general industrial, although you could look at the power substation next door, which is a very unique use as well. But the properties in the county island have a 40-foot height by their zoning that is outside of the city of Tempe's jurisdiction. Our zoning code has 35 feet, and in South Tempe, we do have the Southwest Overlay District, which allows an additional 25 feet in height for this district for developments with occupiable space. The height within a half a mile of the subject area includes Carvana at 93 feet, and the freeway overpass is about 30 feet, and a hotel at about 50 feet. Bella Vita, which is the closest residential project, is 35. Banyan was just approved, and that ranges from 50 to 64 feet. Ironically, the strict application of this code will deprive other properties of the life safety response necessary to assure public health and safety and welfare. These prop buildings are designed for fire response training. The adjustment authorized shall not constitute and grant special privileges inconsistent with limitations upon other properties in the vicinity. The fire and police training buildings with occupiable space are under 38 feet tall, within the existing use permit standard allowance for this site. The variance is needed for the prop buildings, which are unoccupiable space with rappelling ropes, etc. And the variance does not grant special privileges to this site in terms of occupiable space or an intensification of the use, nor does it deny privileges or rights to other properties to ask for the same variance or for their needs. A variance may not be granted for special circumstances if special circumstances are self-imposed by the property owner. The existing land encumbrances were all established prior to the development of this training facilities. Scottsdale purchased the property knowing the existing conditions surrounding the site and built within the parameters of the code at that time. The conditions of other properties being granted additional height for new construction has led to a service need which is provided by each jurisdiction for public health, safety, and welfare. In order to serve taller buildings built, the training facility needs to prepare staff to perform emergency response for taller structures. These special circumstances are applicable to this property and are not self-imposed by the property owner. These are some of the same images you saw. They are providing us a landscape plan. The predominant landscape amenity enhancements are towards the street frontage, so the benefits to the public will be additional street trees along the sidewalks on Curry and Statham and within the landscape areas of the parking areas. Next slide. We did have a neighborhood meeting. We did not have any residents in attendance. I have not received any public input or calls of inquiry. We are recommending approval with conditions, and the applicant has reviewed the conditions of approval. There are no unique conditions for this case. Happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, Diane, for your presentation. We want to start with questions from the board members.
I've got a quick question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Thank you. I'm the fourth condition, fourth rule. I don't know if you want to put that back
Sure.
up on the screen.
Yes.
The purpose, the use for the project is fantastic. I'm worried about any precedent that this board might set based upon the interpretation of that fourth item, self-imposed conditions. And I understand your argument. I'm just wondering if this board does take the affirmative and grants the project, if we're open ourselves up to that same kind of analogy for other things in the future which may not
Sure.
support.
No, that is it's a valid concern. I think looking at the circumstances for this particular site, you have to look at each case as it comes to what the surrounding conditions are as it applies to this property. So unless you had a project that was impacted by adjacent uses, so in this case, the wash is a very unique condition. The substation is a very unique condition. Those impact the way this site is situated. Those are certainly things that the wash has been there before they bought the property. The substation was there before they bought the property. The freeway came in probably after that. But all of those factors play into the unique conditions for this property, and any other project that came in would have to justify how they're meeting this particular criteria.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So Carvana is at 90 feet. There was another one that was above it. Did they go through the use?
So in those cases, they did planned area developments. So the Tempe Code has different means to achieve different ends. If somebody wishes to have additional height, the planned area development is an overlay that changes the development standards from their zoning to allow them that additional height through a negotiated design process. So that's how some of these other projects have gotten additional height.
So is that apples to apples in your mind? No. Okay.
No, they don't have the same criteria. The planned area development has criteria related to the design, and it's unique to whatever the project is and how they've designed it, that they can't meet the design standards, and they're asking for a deviation from those standards within a PAD.
Okay. Do you think we should consider those as buildings that are taller in that general area then, if it's not apples to apples?
Well, in the case of how it affects this property, yes, because this property is designed to serve those properties. So God forbid Carvana has a fire. These guys are the ones that are going to be responding. It's not about they got 93 feet and we want 93 feet. It's about how this property interacts with that taller building on another site.
Thank
Very
you.
unique condition.
And that segue, you segued into the other thing. City of Tempe is currently contracting with City of Scottsdale to train our folks.
We have a symbiotic intergovernmental relationship, so they do share training facilities. Each one's designed a little bit differently. Likewise, we are also called to service, so if there is an emergency response in South Scottsdale and we're closer than Tempe goes, or if it's a multiple alarm fire, they might have multiple responders from different houses attend that. So the relationship is very close in how they work together.
Okay, I thought I read something where we sent people there to get trained. Okay, and that was, the only other issue I had was any pecuniary interest between the cities, and I don't think that would establish any kind of conflict as far as those agreements. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Gaines.
Yes, I do have a question. Tempe and APS share a training, have a joint training facility.
Yes.
Does APS, do they respond as part of a joint response or anything, or are they,
I don't know the relationship for the people they train, but obviously for a substation, electrical fires are something they have to address, so they have their own staff that they probably train to address their own company needs, but I would probably defer to the fire staff that's here. He might know more about those relationships.
okay, because my concern, you're saying that Tempe has the ability, the right to use their training facility and vice versa. And I'm wondering, how does APS fit into that?
I know that we have that shared facility, that training facility on APS property, and so it's property that the city has built their facility on. We have offices there, we train there, but I don't know the details of that relationship. Sorry.
My question, or I guess our comment, was similar to what Councilmember Comfer was commenting on, that this setting a precedent with the requirement number 4, but part of the response is that each property is going to be looked at separately, and how that property, I guess, coordinates with the surroundings, or, works with its surroundings. So that's part of the reason why staff's position is that the variance is not granting a special circumstance because of the specific property uses.
For this particular one, yes. And in other cases, they could ask for a planned area development and negotiate design standards because of the design of what they're building.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Yes.
So part of the logic that you just applied was that because Carvana is at 93 feet, that this facility will support that. What happens when the 120-foot building comes in? What's the plan then? Is it to come back to us for another variance? What's the?
Well, I can't, I'll have to defer to them on what their plans are, but we already have 100-foot buildings in Tempe. We have 200, we're going on 300-foot buildings. It's a completely different application. Those buildings have different fire infrastructure in terms of the sprinkler system, the fire riser rooms. So they, they're not responding with a ladder truck the way they do on the buildings that go up to about 60 feet. It's actually a different building type in the building code.
Okay.
Maybe it's helicopters, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Why didn't the city of Scottsdale go after a PAD development, as you explained?
It is a longer process, and because they're making incremental changes to an existing site, it might not have fit in terms of the parameters of a PAD, which is intended for a development that's, this has an existing police building, for instance, and the buildings that they're building might not fit into the design justification for a PAD based on those criteria. So they were following the guidance that staff gave after we reviewed their preliminary site plan review. We looked at the use permit standard, we looked at the variance, we looked at the PAD, and staff felt this was the best application for their use.
If I may follow up.
Yes, please.
Correct me if I'm wrong, from what it looks like on the plans, are there any structures that are currently present that are going to remain?
Yes, the front portion, if you want to go back to the site plan, the front portion of the police building is staying. They are working on a phase 2 addition to the police. That last one, I'll show it there. So the existing police department training facility is staying. The fire department building is the one that's going to be replaced. They're coming back later for the addition to the police building, and then it's the 3 apparatus training buildings in the back, which are replacement of the ones they have now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Chairman Frazee, I raised my hand. I'm not sure you saw that.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. I cannot see you on my screen, so that's what I was waiting for. Sorry, Ron. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I don't have a question. I just want to comment that I'll be supporting this request. In my opinion, the additional height is necessary to provide the requirements for the height for the training structure that supports critical services in both Tempe and Scottsdale communities. I think that this is a classic example of how a variance process should be applied, and when appropriate, I'd be happy to make a motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Steve.
Chair Frazee, just for protocol's sake, a call to the audience for any comments at this point.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members or members of the audience that wish to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, can I move to call for a request? Let me get the proper verbiage up here. So the request would be a variance for the building height increased for, I'm just trying to find the application number here. Sorry, I don't see that on my,
Chair Frazee,
yes, sorry,
it's PL 220066.
correct, thank you. So a request for a motion this time.
I'm,
I'm happy to make that motion.
oh, okay.
Yes, okay,
I move to approve case number PL 220066, subject to the staff recommended conditions of approval for a variance for a building height increase of 15 feet from 35 feet to 50 feet for the City of Scottsdale Thomas A. Hans Police and Fire Training Facility located at 911 North Statham Drive.
I will second the motion
thank you. So we
to
have a motion,
approve City of Scottsdale Fire, Police and Fire Training Facility, PL 220066.
motion has been made to approve and seconded. It's going to have a vote to approve for ayes.
Chair
Sorry.
Frazee, do a roll call vote.
Let's do a roll call vote,
Thank you.
sorry. So, Ron Kegi,
I vote aye.
Member Comfort,
Aye.
Aye.
thank you. I don't have everybody's name in front of me, I'm sorry. Let's go. Okay, say your name and your vote.
Richard
please.
Watson, aye. Brett Siegel, aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Ricky Lynn,
Sorry,
Ricky Lynn Gans votes aye.
thank you. The chair votes aye. And the motion's passed and approved for PL 220066.
6-0.
6-0. Sorry. Yes, approved 6-0. Thank you. Are there any other meeting items at this time?
No, I just want to thank the members of the board. We should indicate officially we have 2 new members. Ricky Lynn Gans is a full member of the board, and Brett Siegel is an alternate member. I just want to thank them for their public participation, and I want to thank everyone else as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we calling the meeting adjourned?
You may.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
I will second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. And the ayes have it. Thank you.